I'm Renee Richard, and I'm here at the Old Ursuline Convent in the French Quarter today to discuss the life of a very holy woman, the Venerable Cornelia Augustus Peacock Connely. And we'll be talking about the role that New Orleans and Louisiana played in her Catholic journey. She's foundress of the Society of the Holy Child Jesus. So join us as we explore her life. I have with me here today Dr. Emily Loomis. She's the Director of Archives and Records for the Archdiocese of New Orleans and my former co-host back in Baton Rouge on the original Roots of Faith. And she's also the curator of the Old Ursuline Museum that's here in this building. And when you were given the curatorship or duties of the museum, I went to work for you.
You did.
And we did several exhibits together. There was one exhibit in particular, and really that's what's bringing us here today. And that was the one, it was called Ordinary Lives, Extraordinary Gifts, The Road to Sainthood.
Ordinary People,
Extraordinary Gifts, The Road to Sainthood. In that exhibit, we showcased the statues that you saw me open with earlier today, along with a few other people. But that statue of Cornelia Connely, tell us, we knew the others when all this came about.
You have 6 statues in the garden. So you have Mother Catherine Drexel, you have Blessed Silos, Francis Xavier Silos, you have Cabrini, Mother Cabrini, Rose Philippine Duchesne, who is also, Henriette Delille, and then you have, we're missing one.
Well, Cornelia.
And Cornelia, yeah. There you go.
And we knew about these others. So I was the one doing the research, and Lisa says, find out about this other statue in there. And I was fascinated by her life. I mean, I was utterly fascinated by her. She is the foundress of the Society of the Holy Child Jesus, which was founded, I think, in London, either London or Italy, overseas. But her story is incredible.
She is. She's one of these people that she's a soap opera. I mean, that's what actually, when we were doing this research, you made the comment of this woman is a soap opera. And the more we read about her and the more we learned about her, the more we saw the hardships that she went through. I mean, if you think about the different types of hardships that you might get one or two in a family, she
had them all.
She really did. Loss of children, loss
of a loved one, situations that you're criticized for, you throw your heart and soul into, and then you're abandoned on it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing when we get into her life more, what you'll learn about her. And really the thing that stands out to me is that she was born in the wrong century. Had she been in this century, it would have been different maybe for her in terms of her life. But what she accomplished and what she did in the light of her tragedy, and it was those tragedies that made her strong. But again, we're here for the purpose of what did she have to do here? This is a woman that was born 1809 in Philadelphia, did not live here, came from an affluent family. Her father died when she was 9, and her mother died when she was like 14. They had 7 siblings, kind of a blended family at the time, but she went to live with an older sister that she really didn't know that well, who didn't have children, so you figure right there she's removed from having young siblings around her. Her sister they were raised Presbyterian, but her sister really was an indifferent Presbyterian. Her sister's husband, Isabel's husband, August, was very active in the Episcopal Church in Philadelphia. So she ends up being baptized at 22 years old in St. Stephen's Episcopal Church, where she meets the man she's going to marry. And he was a clergyman.
He's an Episcopal priest. Yeah. So she marries this Episcopal priest.
Right. And then
he gets sent then
to Natchez,
Mississippi. And that's so close to us, because we even have records, in Baton Rouge, there's records that from Natchez that are at the cathedral. I mean, they're in the books because you had itinerant priests going back and forth during that time period. So it is an unusual, with this connection of where they would have been, so close to the the river is right there. You jump over
Port
it, you're
City.
in Louisiana.
But for her, coming from Philadelphia, the 700 or 1,500 mile journey, whatever it is, to come down to Natchez with a population of 3,000, and she's, very worldly. So, I mean, it had to be cultural shock. She's like the end of the world.
Sure, yeah.
But being a port city was multiracial, it was multi-ethnic, it was the same thing, but multicultural. And here they are, Protestant, coming into a little bit closer to this Catholicism area further south. And he befriends a Catholic gentleman in Natchez, but also, this is the time frame, we're looking at the 1830s at this point, because she was born in 1809. So here we're in the 1830s, and if you look at what's happening nationwide, the Irish immigrants are coming in. These are Catholic coming into the East Coast. And there's a lot of anti-Catholic sentiment going on.
Well, they burned the Ursuline convent that's
exactly.
up north.
And that was really a turning point for the two of them, because the way they both felt, I mean, she supported her husband, as women in that era did. Whatever he wanted was fine. He was very, very ambitious. So being in Natchez was not exactly his dream either, because he wanted to be made bishop and he wanted to be a city clergyman. But when that burning occurred to the convent in Boston, they looked at it as, is this justified? Here we are, of Protestant faith. And they didn't like some of what was, they're being so aggressive towards him. So they started reading about Catholicism from a perspective of, we need to learn more about it in both angles. Well, surprisingly, the more they read, the more both of them became interested in the Catholic faith. And, so coming there was a big turning point. And what ended up happening to put him here was that there was a church convention going on in New Orleans, Protestant church convention. They were making a new bishop for this area. And man, Pierce, her husband, Pierce Connely, really wanted to become bishop in a bigger, broader city like New Orleans. So they come down here where they're immersed in Catholicism all around them. And that was really a big, turning point, again, in her road to her conversion here. So that really pushed both of them a little further to becoming Catholic.
And as they continue to learn about Catholicism, they are invited then to attend Antoine Blanc's elevation to bishop in the city of New Orleans. So here they are in the cathedral. They are witnessing this beautiful ordination. And Cornelia says she has never seen anything more spectacular, and in that feeling of faith and watching how someone becomes a bishop when they're ordained bishop. And she's there, and there's bishops from all over the country. Bishop Rosati from St. Louis is here. There's other bishops here. Of course, Bishop Blanc is being ordained and elevated. And it's just this extraordinary experience for her.
And it was the first Mass she had ever attended.
Yeah.
So to attend your first Mass, and it's a celebration like this, there was this instant desire. She had already, moving towards Catholicism, but it was that conversion right then and there.
And they were only going to be here for a couple of weeks.
Actually, they were going to be here just a few days, and their boat got delayed. They were en route to Rome because Pierce wanted to learn more about Catholicism, and as ambitious as he was, he really wanted to learn more about it at its grassroots in Rome. And that was the big push, because here he is a married man, and he's thinking, I want to become a priest. And they said, well, the only way you could do that is if you have an audience with the Pope, and there's certain things you'll have to do. And so they're leaving for Rome. And she's here for 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, she meets with Antoine Blanc, who, of course, has the ties to our diocese in Baton Rouge. She meets with him in this building, and they said that with the research that's done, she journaled everything. And she met with him, and she made the decision to become Catholic before they ever left for Rome. And it was a decision that she and Pierce had talked about they would do together. And she is very independent. She was very strong-willed.
She does it before he does.
Yeah.
She does
it's
that.
Here.
And it is on the feast
of the Immaculate Conception, December 8th.
Yep.
That she made her first communion, her profession of faith.
Her profession of faith, and so she's not confirmed yet. They'll wait, and she'll do that in Rome when Pierce does it as well. But she then takes those steps to become Catholic. And what Antoine Blanc writes is that she was a woman that was so faithful and so ready to be Catholic that conversion happened faster than he's ever seen it. And she was just this wonderful, prayerful woman that was ready to become Catholic. And she does that here in the city. And, she's here at the convent of the Ursulines. And so I'm sure that she was also talking to them and learning more about the faith from the sisters. And it's really an incredible story.
We were just talking about Cornelius's faith journey right here before they leave for Rome. And the whole reason they were going to Rome, of course, was for Pierce to learn more about the faith. And so they do go to Rome for 2 years. They live there among other Catholic groups. And they have 2 children, I know, at that point when they're leaving to go. And I'm pretty sure they may have one or may have had
They're
one
going to eventually have 5
Italy. They'll
children.
have 5 children.
Yeah. Which is just, again, so here he wants to become a Catholic priest. She's married to him. She has children with him. And so today we know how to, we move through that. We've seen people in our own dioceses that were Episcopal ministers that have become Catholic priests. But this is the 1830s. I remember when we were doing this research thinking, oh, you could do that back then too? And so
wait a minute,
they go to Rome. Yeah, how did they do that?
Then,
they went to Rome, and of course he has his conversion there.
Worked. He becomes a priest.
Confirmed.
I mean, he doesn't become a priest, he becomes a Catholic. Mm-hmm. And he wants to be a priest, and they tell him, slow down, go learn. So they actually come back to Louisiana. And they live at Grand Coteau.
That's right.
For 2 years. And
so now they've moved from the Ursulines to what would have been Rose Philippine Duchen's
order, the Sacred Heart.
Of the Sacred Heart, and they live on Grand Coteau, and they're teaching.
He's teaching at St. Charles with the Jesuits, and she was teaching music. Yes. She was teaching music at the Academy of the Sacred Heart, and it's there that she has Madeline. So that would have been their 3rd child, I believe, and Madeline died 6 weeks later, and throughout her life, she maintained this relationship with Antoine Blanc. He is the godfather, I believe, of Madeline. And then she has another child, John Henry, and tragic things happen again to her there.
Yeah, well, the 2-year-old, or the
John
child,
Henry,
was 2 years old, and they have a Newfoundland dog. And if you've ever seen those dogs are huge.
Huge.
And they're playing in the yard, and the dog knocks the 2-year-old into a boiling vat of sugar.
Yeah, at that time, probably during grinding. And back then, they would stir the kettles over fire.
I just can't even imagine the horrors of someone falling into boiling sugar. And this is a 2-year-old.
A 2-year-old. And what happens is, they're in Grand Coteau, which is isolated, even now, much less then. But they know the child is going to die. It happens on a Friday, and Cornelia literally, I could cry talking about it. She holds him in her arms for 43 hours.
I know. 40. She does. She does. She holds this baby for 43 hours as this baby dies. And she, at that point in time, realizes that this is what Mary went through in suffering from Friday through Sunday with Jesus.
And then he died on the feast of the presentation of the infant Jesus. So in her mind, it all consolidated it. And right then and there, she said, whatever he chooses to do, if this is what God wants of me, this is what I'll do.
And it's a story that, we see so many people, those that go into religious life having lost children. I mean, we've talked about some of those before. We know Henriette lost children. Mm-hmm. We know Cornelia's going to lose children. There are others that it's just this profound. Margaret Hoggery loses a child. There's something about losing children and husbands and those loved ones that just you're on your knees praying and having to go through that. And that's when she really knows what she needs.
And in her writing, she says that is the point where really the seeds for her order come about, the starting points of her thinking, that this is going to happen. Because shortly after that, Pierce announces that, yes, I definitely want to be a priest. And she was devastated. This is her husband. This is her world. And in that day and time, for a woman, she followed what he wanted. They were submissive to their husbands. It's okay, if this is what you want, this is what we'll do. And back then, though, it meant her living a life of chastity in a convent. And here she has these children. What's going to happen to her children?
The children went with her to the convent.
Well, in the beginning.
Well, yeah.
So once he made that decision, though, then he took her away from her home, income, because they're teaching. They have no source of income, no nothing. And he says, okay, we're going to Rome, and I'm going to become a priest. And she's, okay. she turned it over to God again, her prayer. So they go back to Rome, and they have an audience before Pope Gregory the 16th. And the conditions were that they sign a decree of separation, and the wife had to agree to it. And Cornelia said, whatever, he wants, I guess this is what God's calling us to do. She had tremendous faith in all of these. I can't imagine my world being turned upside down as hers was. So she signs the agreement of separation, and they take her she actually goes to the Sisters of the Sacred Heart, which are cloistered in Italy. So she's in the convent with the two. Frank is born, I think, in Italy. So she's there with the two youngest, her daughter Addie, and then and Frank Mercer, her son. Frank, her husband Pierce, took him and put him in boarding school in England. And of course, the church is providing for this because she's in the convent and he's becoming a priest. So really, in their eyes at that time frame, she kept the two youngest. At that time with her. But so what comes down the tube, then here we go again with the turmoil in this woman's life. She is having a very difficult time in a cloistered environment because she was a music teacher. She loved children. She loved being around people, and she came from a large family. So at that point in time, she's in the convent with Frank. She sees him playing in the courtyard next to a statue of Mary holding Jesus. And that's really when she decided she wasn't going to stay in with the Sisters of the Sacred Heart, but she would found her own community. And then another turning point comes in her life.
So Renee, one of the things we were talking about before was there at least Pierce, her husband, and Cornelia are able to see each other. You and I talked about that, and so he's still visiting. I mean, that I always find really interesting as well. So here he's a priest, but he has visits with her once a week, and the kids, and they then decide that can't happen anymore.
Well, it didn't happen until what ended up happening is they sent both of them to England, and at that time. You're looking at, again, anti-Catholic, Catholicism is just starting to take root again in England, and so they want her to go found her new order. She's now with Bishop Nicholas Wiseman, and she's, I forget where she was, in Drury. And so they give her this Gothic building, and she thinks she's going to a convent, and they strap her with the debt. They strap her with, it's in deplorable conditions, and for the first time in her life, she's living in abject poverty there. She had 3 apostolates that went with her. They sent him to England, but he's close enough that he's seeing her. Well, then they said, this is scandalous. We're trying to make the Catholic Church look good in England, so you shouldn't see each other anymore. Okay, that's fine. And then they told her, she's got Addie and Frank with her, and they said, this is not good for children to be in this convent with the founder of the convent and these postulates. We need you to be, this foundress figure. So they take her to the 2 younger children and they put them in boarding school. So she is left without her children, without her husband, starting an order with 3 women in abject poverty. She's teaching. The bulk of her kids, both of her students were Irish immigrants. And then she was criticized for wanting to teach them music or dance. It took them years for her to develop the rule. As a matter of fact, her rules of her society, the rules by which the order follows, were not solidified till I think after her death, even. But all of this time, she's trying to live this pious life gracefully. Her writings and the first-hand accounts they have of her said that she was always smiling, always prayerful, gentle soul. She was very outspoken about what she wanted.
She wrote every day. I mean,
profusely.
She really writes, but we have lots and lots. The order still maintains all of those writings. So
Although they almost got pitched at one time. We'll come back to that.
They're forever wanting to make sure. I mean, she's documenting a lot of this and a lot of what she's thinking about and why she's thinking about it and where her faith is leading her. And those are the writings that are so important.
And then here comes more heartache.
Yes.
Because the next thing that happens is Pierce now, she was really the strong one in their relationship. She was always there to say, yes, baby, that's what you need to do. If you want to do this, she was his strength and his rock. The minute they separated him, he started unraveling. So then he was disillusioned with the Catholic Church because he wasn't advancing, he wasn't moving up. They're telling him what he can and can't do. And he rushed into it so fast, I don't know how much thought he actually gave that, but the man now is going into depression, and he realizes, I need Cornelia. I want Cornelia back. Well, she had asked him before he made those final vows, are you sure you want this? Because if this is what God's calling, this is it. And she turned her life over to God at that point. So what does he do? They had forbid him to show up. He shows up at her convent wanting to see her. So I can't imagine the emotion of not seeing your husband for a long period of time. And then here's this man showing up in front of her, wanting to see her and wanting her back. The emotional turmoil there for her. She denies him and says, no, you need to leave now. And she walks away from the door. He stayed there 6 hours, crying, wailing, wanting to see her before he finally left. Then he tried to see her again. She would not see him at all. And at that point, it got even uglier.
It does, because then he sues her in court.
He takes the kids away, too.
Yeah, takes the
kids away. He kidnaps the kids. Tries to use that to manipulate her.
And sues her in court to get back his wife and his conjugal visits. Right. His conjugal rights to her. And she says no. And for years, this drags on in the
appeals and everything
British
else.
Court.
I think 2 years in direct court, and he wins. They grant him, yes, you can have your wife back and your conjugal visits and dissolve it. Well, she was adamant about it. And so she had her lawyer appeal. Yeah, she had her lawyer appeal. So it goes through the appeals courts. It drags through that, and she wins that one. Well, when he realizes he's not going to get away, he leaves out of the lawsuit, but leaves her holding the bag for the debt of the lawsuit. And it dragged through the courts for 8 years total.
Yeah,
it was terrible. So she was called Mrs. Wiseman because he was accusing her of having a relationship with the bishop, who was her confessor and her guidance in establishing.
And this was in the newspapers. This was the scandal of the day. This was.
Connely versus Connely.
Connely versus Connely. I mean, it was the soap opera of the day, is to read what's going on in court with these two people.
Well, I've been told they did a Broadway play about it, but I hadn't been able to find anything about that. Seriously.
Yeah.
I was told that.
Yeah. But, I mean, that's where you are right now, is that here are these two people suing each other. And
he started.
Yeah, he definitely started it. But she says no.
I mean, how much turmoil can you have in your life? So what ends up happening is he becomes anti-Catholic at that point. He has a horrible influence on the children
Takes the kids,
at that point.
Yeah.
Mercer, her oldest one, who was in boarding school, he's 20 at this point, so they send him to live with an uncle here in New Orleans, and he dies of yellow fever here in New Orleans. So she never saw Mercer again from the time he was taken away as a child. Not taken away, but put in a boarding school as a child. So she mourned the loss of him tremendously. Addie never married. She was caregiver for her father. He ended up going back to the Episcopal Church and becoming an Episcopal minister until he died around 1883. But Addie never married, and she went to visit an uncle once who vehemently accused Pierce of stunning her growth, of controlling her so much. Now, she did see her mother once or twice, came to visit her, and Frank went to visit Cornelia. The Gothic, horrible place that they had her in, this manor home, that she could not pay for it, couldn't pay the debt on it. So she was able to procure, someone gave them in St. Leonard by the sea, another monastery, another building, which is where she founded the order, really got it on its feet. And it came from there. It was a teaching order. I believe it's still there. I believe that's still the universal one. And she was sickly, I guess so, with the amount of stress that she was under with all of that. Her youngest son, Frank, visited her twice. The first time was a very warm encounter with her. But the second time that he visited, he was more withdrawn from her. And he never married. He did have a child in a relationship. And that's the only descendant that still, I think, exists, is the bloodline from him. He was a famous sculptor and painter the rest of his life. And Addie did return to Catholicism after her father died, but even then, this woman had problems with her order because when she went to write the rules in her lifetime, they would send them to Rome, and Rome would say, no, you can't do this, and no, you can't do that, because she didn't want it to be like the others. There were two different groups. You had a teaching group and another group, and maybe I want to say it was
the choir,
a secular group or something. Yeah. I'm not real sure the details of that, but they didn't want the two groups to live in the same place. So she finally agreed. She's not well. We're getting into like 1875, 1876. She dies in 79. but she wants to see this done before she dies. So when she says, okay, I'll agree to those terms, the two groups were devastated because here they had lived in the same community for years, and they took it as a personal insult from her that she wanted it differently, which is not what she intended. There was a lot of miscommunication, misunderstandings that took place in the order alone. Now, the order is growing. I mean, people are coming in, and it's a growing order. But she ends up dying when the rules are being made.
And the sad part that was, besides her whole life, and then, but you've got this dichotomy. So you've got all this heartache and all of this suffering that's going on in her life, but you also have this order that's thriving and all the good that it's doing. And the order, as new postulates would come in, they didn't even tell Cornelia's story for almost 50 years.
Yeah, after she died.
Because of the scandal of the court cases and everything else about the woman that had founded them. And now they're very proud of it. Now they teach her history. They tell you about her. There's a book written about her. But it took a very long time for them, as they moved through the process of seeing what this woman had gone through and then opening her cause for sainthood.
And the cause was opened in 1959. However, when at the time when she's dying, right after she died, in they didn't talk about it for 50 years, so from 79 to the 1930s, the order's growing. They started the American version, the American Providence in Philadelphia, and I'm not sure when that time, in the 1930s, I believe, but that's when they start looking at her, and through all that turmoil, this woman she's gentle. I mean, they see her strengths, but she's constantly in prayer, soft-spoken, gentle. That's how they describe her, her demeanor with them and with her people. She was always such a holy person. That's how they, how they knew her when she was alive. And then they almost threw all of her writings away, which is what they study for sainthood, this amazing woman, and how every turmoil she came, she identified with the Mother of Sorrows. She always had a very strong devotion to the Blessed Mother, because being a mother, and especially with the death of John Henry when he died in the vat. And so, but in the 1930s, they literally had someone that wanted to clean house, and she shouldn't be talked about, and they almost threw all of those papers away.
If we hadn't had that knowledge?
I know. And her cause was actually opened in 1959, and I think it was 1992 she was actually made venerable, then.
So she's still on the road. There's still a great devotion to her. And if anybody wants to know more about her, go read. I mean, her writings, her life. We have to gloss over it, not gloss over it, but we have to quickly tell it.
Cover it, but there's so much depth to what happened to this woman. And the other thing is, her schools are here. I mean, and they're called Cornelia Connely Academy. You see them all over in the West Coast, and they're in the Northeast of the U.S. We don't have any here, but they know her story. Here in Louisiana, the only, we're bringing this to you because we had a statue that we didn't understand why she was there and what happened to her. But her whole life revolved around what happened here in New Orleans, and then her years spent, especially with the death of her children, in
Grand Coteau.
Yeah,
Louisiana had a profound
effect on her, which is why she's in there. And we love to tell her story because you just don't hear it, but it's out there. Read about it. It's so amazing.
She really is an incredible woman, and
her story needs to be told.
Her story does need to be told, and we now tell it all the time here at the convent.
I tell it to anybody I can, but you can see I cry through it. I can't even imagine going through the things that this woman went through. So tremendous faith. So that's why we're here today. So, Emily, thank you, because we had fun doing this. We had fun working on the exhibit. It took me 6 months to research, to really read and all these statues in the garden. But that's what makes this place so wonderful. So, folks, thank you for joining us. And you need to come and visit this museum. The exhibits are awesome here. And visit these statues. And really, this series of shows that we're doing is based on that exhibit that I did, because I wanted to get the story of all these people out. And so that's what we've tried to do. So thank you for joining us and learning more about Cornelia Connely